I know from my own experiences at home with my printer block, which is a $600-700 kit that I built, that actually creating, acquiring and editing content is an issue, it's a big problem. I find it a big problem. What's going to happen in the future?
Right now, the market for 3D printing is actually limited by more than anything else by the people who either have CAD software or at least some skill with CAD software, which could be as few as 3 million people. And so, it's amazing to give people a machine, but when someone comes up to you and says, oh, it's a 3D printer, what can I make? The answer is, well, you could make a million things, but if you don't already know the answer to that question, and have the idea and the skills to actually produce something that the 3D printer can use, then there's no point in answering that question for you. I mean, you don't have the necessary skills to use the tool. This is not a hammer, unfortunately.
A recent survey came out through engineering.com that only 33% of engineers know how to model in 3D. If the engineers don't know how to do it, what hope is there for the rest of us?
I don't think that the use of 3D software is going to become widespread until a generation of kids and students grow up who have grown up using this. It is another language. It is a way of communicating with a machine. It is a way of communicating with other 3D professionals, which has to be natural. And the best time to learn a language is when you're young.
Just a couple of months ago was an 8th grader that I met at a science fair who had made his own machine based on the open source model. And he could explain all the ins and outs of the machines, but I asked him, well, so what are you going to make next? Because he'd made some standard things like an iPhone case and a couple of things. And he just kind of looked at me with, I could see there was a little gleam in his eye, and he said, whatever I want.
Boeing have 20,000 flying parts across 10 platforms. These are flying parts, direct digital manufacturing. 70,000 surgery drill guards have been produced, which are used in surgery, clearly. Invisalign, you're probably all familiar with Invisalign. Probably 3D Systems' biggest customer. I think the number I wrote down was 17 million per year printed. And another number, 22.8 million parts in 2012 3D printed. Now some of those will be prototyping, some will be final parts. And size of the market, it depends who you believe, but it's probably around about 2 billion. What can you make? And what will we be making in the future?
It simply goes to demonstrate that these are tools with which you can make anything, and if somebody wants to make something, well, they can. I'm sure there'll be legislation to address this, and we hope that it's sensible legislation that doesn't stifle the growth of jobs that 3D printing is creating, particularly here in America.
Many of us don't realize the limitations of subtractive machining. With a 3D printer, you can make a solid block which has a helical hole going through it, which is impossible to make in a conventional machine shop. You can make a fully assembled hinge, a fully assembled mechanism with gears and axles. This was never before possible. It's very interesting. Another point is that many of the technologies involved are protected by patents, which are going to expire in the next 5 to 10 years. So there will be an explosion of open source and commercial development, particularly in powder printing at that point.
Thank you. I think you probably find there's more questions than answers. So we're going to be around, so do come and grab us. On the final question about printers, there's a big problem that these companies that are making them do not have the capital to really start building up inventory and stock and shoving it through Best Buy. And you do need to have that capital behind it to really get into the consumer market.